the locker room. Last night, the Saints showed, and I said this going into the game, and I still believe it. They're just good enough to barely miss the playoffs, and I think that's what's going to happen. They're going to barely miss the playoffs. And I don't know, can they go to Tampa next week and beat the Buccaneers? They already lost to the Buccaneers at home. That's been a great rivalry in recent years. The Tom Brady years, the Buccaneers always had, or the Saints, always had Tom Brady's number when he was playing for the Buccaneers. But what I saw last night was a team that got blown off the field. It was 30-7, and then I think the Saints, this was my assessment while watching the game, and I love Monday night and Thursday night because those are the 2 nights a week that I can watch the whole game as it's happening live, not after the fact, and develop a sense, just that what's really going on here. And I feel like once it was 30-7, the Saints went into let's make the final score not look as bad as it was mode. Because the drive that culminated in the touchdown that cut it to 30-14, they were kind of plodding, dinking and dunking, no real sense of urgency like, hey, this is just the first of 3 scores we need to catch them. I never got that sense that this was about winning the game or forcing overtime. This is about, let's go down here and get a touchdown because 30-7 looks pretty bad. Let's make it 30-14. And then the block punt, and they started the dink and dunk again until the long touchdown pass that made it 30-22. That changed the vibe, and it woke the Rams up, and it put them in a spot where they maybe had to sweat more than they thought they were going to. I mean, there was a point early in the fourth quarter where Sean McVay was very celebratory on the sidelines. It's like, yeah, it's 30-7. And I mean, really, are the Saints going to come back from 30-7? They almost tripped their way into it. But, Charean, I think that they really, when they were on that first drive that cut it to 30-14, that to me just felt like save face. Score a touchdown, 30-14 looks so much better than 30-7. And 30-22, for somebody who just does a quick drive-by of the scores, they're going to think, well, Saints were competitive. But they weren't. They scored a couple of touchdowns late when the game was out of hand, and they made the final score not look as bad as it would have. And I just feel like that's what they wanted to do once it was 30-7.
Well, I think we have enough evidence now that Derek Carr is what he's shown. He's done it with 2 teams. He's just good enough to.
And what is that?
As you said,
he's what? What is he?
Stay out of the playoffs. He's just good enough to keep you out of the playoffs, to keep you competitive, to keep you out of the playoffs. If he gets into the playoffs, which he's done it twice and only got to play in 1 playoff game, he's not going to win the playoff game. So he's just not good enough. I mean, I think there's enough evidence of that he's not good enough to get you in the playoffs and have a chance. It was obvious who the better quarterback was. And when you start looking at the divisions, Mike, and the division leaders, aside from the NFC South, the AFC South, I think there'd be a little argument there. But aside from that division, if you look at the other divisions, the quarterback, the best quarterback on the team is going to win that division more than likely. So, the NFC East has 2 really good quarterbacks. You can debate whether Dak Prescott's playing better than Jalen Hurts this year, but you can debate which is the better quarterback. I'll take that. But the best quarterbacks usually win in this league, period, end of story. So my point is, I don't know that you can win. The Saints can win with Derek Carr as their quarterback. The Raiders finally figured that out and said, we've got to move on. Now the Saints have this guy for at least 1 more year. Now they don't have to play him. They have Jameis Winston sitting over there, but he's not good enough. I think that's where we are. He's not good enough to take them where they want to go.
This is the layers and levels of quarterback competence below franchise quarterbacks. There are guys who we've seen it, and at a certain point, you just are who you are. And there's no shame in being a quarterback who is good enough to get you into the fringes of playoff contention every year. And look, to his credit, the Raiders gave the Bengals everything they could handle a couple of years ago in the wild card round. We didn't know at the time the Bengals were headed to the Super Bowl. The Bengals didn't know they were headed to the Super Bowl. But the Raiders gave them a game, and there was that weird call with the phantom whistle in the first half that kind of undermined things and made you think maybe the Raiders got screwed a little bit. And it was all the way down to a final drive where they were trying to force overtime. But Derek Carr didn't deliver. That's the thing. You get opportunities. They're pass-fail. The opportunities come along not very often. What do you do with them? The great quarterbacks cash them in. The guys who aren't among the great quarterbacks cash them out. And that's what Derek Carr is. He is who he is. He's not going to magically get better, I don't think. Now, look, I was saying the same things about Kirk Cousins, and the last we saw of Cousins in a full game this year, he was the best he'd ever been. And I think there's plausible hope that if he's back with the Vikings next year, he'll play that well wire to wire, although he will be 36, I believe, in August. Carr is who he is. And Charean, they made a commitment to him, and I don't know who else they were competing with. You know, the whole thing last year when the Raiders decided they wanted to cut him or trade him, or at least work out a deal to trade him before another $40 million became fully guaranteed in February, right after the Super Bowl. And I knew at the time, you're not going to pull this off. He's got no reason to comply, no reason to cooperate. Just cut me. And they eventually cut him. He had a head start on free agency. I think the Jets would have been interested in him if they weren't able to get Aaron Rodgers. I know the Jets would have been interested in him if they weren't able to get Aaron Rodgers. The Saints, I don't know who else was in that mix, but the Saints gave him a contract that contains $30 million fully guaranteed next year. And as of March of next year, there's a $10 million roster bonus payable in 2025 that becomes fully guaranteed in just a few months. $40 million still to be paid. The same number, coincidentally or ironically or both or neither. $40 million that the Saints aren't getting away from because they're already on the hook for 30. They're all in with Derek Carr for next year. Now, they don't have to play him, but they do have to pay him. And no one's trading for him. Just like last year. I mean, think about it. If all of a sudden the Saints would make it known to the NFL at large that Derek Carr is available, who would be rushing to do that deal after what we've seen from Derek Carr over the balance of his career? And, you know, look, I mean, it's not like he's going to block me on Twitter for saying this because he already has. But we have to be honest in our assessment. We can't sugarcoat it. He is exactly where he is. Middle of the pack at best. And there's no shame in that. Middle of the pack at best. And I don't know that there's some magic button that's going to be pressed on Derek Carr to get him to become better than he's been. Maybe there's some coach out there that can find a way to get through to him and get him to stand in the pocket longer and get him to not get rattled, as Bruce Irvin said. Not my words, Bruce Irvin's words. Rattled when you get around him. 10 years, 11 years into the league, I don't know how you change that.
Maybe if you have a good running game like the Bills did to the Cowboys, you can rush for 200 yards a game, and he's still going to have to make some plays. But maybe if you can build it around a really good running back and good offensive line and give him some time with a couple of good receivers, I don't know. But, you know, I think he's had enough opportunities. I mean, he had Devontae Adams last year, and Devontae had another huge year last year, and look what it did for the Raiders. Absolutely nothing last year. So I don't even know if that's the answer. They had a running back who led the league in rushing and Josh Jacobs, and that didn't do anything for him. So I don't know what the answer is for the Saints going forward. I do know that he's going to be on the roster next year, but you don't have to play him. So you probably need to go draft a quarterback and start trying to get him ready to play. If you can find one that you really like, that's not going to be one of those top 5 picks. So that's the problem, is the Saints are just not quite good enough to make the playoffs, but not quite bad enough to get high enough to draft one of those really good quarterbacks. So they're kind of in that middle of the road type hell that you don't want to be in, Mike. If you're going to not make the playoffs, like, you want to be bad. You want to have an opportunity if you don't have a quarterback to go get your quarterback, and that's not where the Saints are right now.
You might be advocating tanking there, but from a business standpoint, I don't know what it does from a football culture standpoint. Sean Payton is very, very adamant about that you don't want to introduce the concept of losing and accepting losing into a locker room, because then you lose guys that you may never get back. But if you know you're not going to make the playoffs, it is better for your long-term interest to be in a position where you can draft a quarterback. And, you know, Saints fans, after a game like last night, fire Dennis Allen. Well, the new coach is going to have his hands tied with Derek Carr, with that $40 million, $30 million plus another 10 that becomes fully guaranteed. I want to say one more thing about Carr. Cam Newton caused a ruckus, I think it was last week, by labeling Tua and Dak and Brock Purdy and Jared Goff as game managers. I think you're only ever going to get the best out of Derek Carr if you make him a game manager. The guy who makes the basic meat and potato throws, has enough help around him. You're not asking him to go out and win the game. You're just asking him to hold it together. So it's going to work, and I think this may be why the Jets were interested. Great defense, great running game, just don't screw it up. That's the Derek Carr best case scenario. A great team, and you say to Derek Carr, don't screw it up. So maybe there is a team out there. I haven't really thought about it. Maybe there is a team that says, yeah, this is a don't screw it up guy, but you're not going to pay that guy $40 million guaranteed. That's the reality. He's not a guy that gets that kind of money. It's a Jimmy Garoppolo $25 million a year contract. So the Saints are stuck for another year. They're stuck. They're just lather, rinse, repeat. Unless they're willing to pay him and not play him, Charean, they're stuck with Derek Carr.
And what kind of backup is he going to be, Mike? I can't see him. We saw what happened at the end of the year with the Raiders. I can't see him sitting on the bench being a good teammate. If Jameis Winston is the starting quarterback or whoever it is, I just can't see that happening. So that's another problem is you're paying him all this money, and even if you sit him down, I just don't think he's going to be good in the locker room, in the quarterback's room with those guys, and that's what you need for a backup quarterback. I think Jameis Winston has become that guy, but I don't think that's Derek Carr.
I got two more things to say. I know Courtney's told me to break, but it wasn't the forceful one-syllable break yet. It was just break next. When it's break next, it's coming, but let me get this out first. Okay, two things real quick. One, I hated the onside kick by the Saints once they made it 30-22. I hated that. There was 3:53 left. They had no timeouts. There's 3:53 left. Kick it away. You just blocked a punt that the Rams had. That's going to be in their heads. They're going to be more conservative. They're going to be more careful. They're going to be more nervous if they've got the ball on their own 25, not on your 45. You still have to stop them either way. But why are you giving them field position right there where they've got the cushion of 55 yards behind them? Kick it away. 3:53 is a lot of time. 3:53 requires 2 first downs unless you jump offside on 3rd and short and the clock keeps running, and then all you have to do with 42 seconds left is take a knee. And that's my other point. Yeah. They almost, I don't want to say almost, they invited disaster on Sunday. They had about 42, 43 seconds left on the clock. All they had to do was run a play, get the play clock to 40, and the game's over. And they did what could have been another Joe Pisarcik, Larry Zonka disaster. They handed the ball off. Ball squirts out. There's a Herm Edwards there to pick it up. Commanders win that game. Last night, they did what they should have done on Sunday. Matthew Stafford gets the ball, walks it back, gets it down to 40, takes a knee, game over. And when I made that point on Twitter, people were like, oh, why are you, it didn't happen, so why does it matter? Well, it could have happened. We talk about percentages all the time. There's a 0% chance of disaster if you do what you did last night. There is a non-0% chance of disaster if you hand the ball off when you don't have to. That's what the Giants found out the hard way in, what was it, 1978, whenever it was. That's the kind of lesson the Rams, very small chance, could have learned on Sunday.
Well, and they did it last night, so I guess they have learned their lesson, Mike, but you're right. It's exactly what they needed to do. That's exactly what they needed to do on Sunday, and now they did it in this game. I think in Dennis Allen's mind, and while I read his quotes, he didn't think they were going to stop them, whatever they did, so it was their best opportunity to get the ball. But you had just blocked the punt before. If it was me, I would have kicked it deep and taken my chances on making a stop, loaded up my defense to not only stop the run, but to stop those short passes. If they beat me deep, so be it. They beat me deep. But to me, that probably would have given them the best opportunity, considering that there's only been one onside kick recovered this season. The chances of that were not very good. The chances of them stopping the Rams, I get, were not very good either. But I think if you kick it deep, you've got more of a chance to stop them. Simply because you're right. They had all that cushion behind them where if they're backed up deep, if you can back them up deep, maybe something happens. Maybe they get a holding call. Maybe they fumble the ball. Who knows? But something could have happened there to give you an opportunity to at least maybe force a punt where they weren't going to do that with the onside kick.
Yeah, it was the holding call that set up the situation that resulted in the punt that was blocked. But, I mean, think of the psychology of the Rams, knowing they had just had a punt blocked. They get the ball on their 25. Maybe they will be a little more aggressive offensively. And maybe they'll take some shots in the air, incomplete pass, stop the clock, fourth down, execute the punt, get the ball back. I just think the onside kick is such a low percentage play. And the way they set it up, like they lined up like they were going to kick deep, and then the quarterback does some weird, or the kicker, does some weird little thing before he kicked it. Either commit to the onside kick or kick it away. Don't do this cutesy thing where you line up like you're going to do a regular kick and then try to surprise somebody. You didn't surprise anybody with that. So I thought it was a mistake. Not that it would have changed the outcome. I just think at that point the Saints really didn't want to change the outcome. They were just happy to get out of there at 30-22 because that looked a hell of a lot better than 30-7 because the Rams were clearly the better team on the field last night. Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.